Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the Boston Bruins, whether or not they're going to win the President's Trophy again, and what happens if they don't. So before we start with that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So Boston has been a good to great team since I can remember for the majority of my life. They have made the playoffs 14 out of the past 16 seasons, just missing out on those 2 years that they didn't make it. And in that time, you've seen a lot of success. They have won 6 division titles. They've been to the Stanley Cup Final 3 times, and they won Lord Stanley once all the way back in 2011. And on top of that, too, we've seen some really memorable seasons along the way with 3 President's Trophies won by this side, with the most recent one coming in 2023 as this team had a jaw-dropping 135-point season and has really sparked talk about, could this be a team that wins back-to-back President's Trophies? Now, this isn't going to be the first team to do that, as you have seen multiple sides. The Edmonton Oilers did it way back in the day. The Detroit Red Wings, I believe, have done it on 2 separate occasions. But the most recent franchise to do this was the 2016 and 2017 Washington Capitals. And now Boston is looking to say, hey, maybe we could do something that hasn't been done in a bit, and just kind of getting into whether or not they could do it. And so far, things look relatively good here, as they have 95 points in 69 games played and are atop the league standings. And this is a side that MoneyPuck.com actually doesn't have winning the President's Trophy, and you're saying, okay, well, who else would it be? The New York Rangers are who they project to go on and win it. They actually have Boston, I believe, finishing 4th. And I know some people are going to look at it and say, man, I'm really frustrated with this. What's wrong with this? The biggest thing that you're looking at here for Boston is the fact they have the 2nd hardest remaining strength of schedule for the rest of the season. And that is going to be a bit daunting even for a team that's been really good. Now, the good news is with this side, they have a really good set of numbers. You're looking at 5-on-5. Things look pretty good there, and a top unit on the power play in the PK. All things that you say, well, I feel really good about this team going into the playoffs, but as well seeing what they can do for the remainder of the regular season. And it is kind of weird that Boston is in this same position where they could go on to win the President's Trophy, not because they haven't had a good year. Clearly, they have had things go their way, as they're already at the 40-win mark this season. However, they aren't a team that's really been able to just rally off and get a bunch of wins. You think of teams like Edmonton, you think of some teams like Florida, where they just are really blistering at a pace that is, not really sustainable for a full season, but it certainly helped them in league standings. Boston, meanwhile, has not had that really long win streak. More so, they've had a lot of 4-game win streaks that they've been able to have things go well there too, as well as the fact that the Bruins have been able to make losses beneficial. And what I mean by that is, out of their 29 losses, 15 of those have come after regulation, so you get the loser's point. I don't really like to call it that because, again, I kind of consider it money in the bank for standings, whereas only 14 losses this year have come in the first 60 minutes of play. So the Bruins are, again, kind of in this spot where you say, if we're talking about them making the President's Trophy, things look good because they've won a lot of games, and if they do lose, they tend to get the most out of it when they get that extra point. Now, you could look at this on the flip side and say, well, they might not be able to make it because of the really hard remaining schedule and the fact that there are still so many teams that are within striking distance. I think you could probably make the argument there are 5 to maybe 9 other teams, maybe in that regard, where you could say some of these sides realistically probably aren't going to have enough time to catch up to them. However, they have games in hand compared to some other sides, and they could go out there and do it. I think of a team like Edmonton. They have 3 games in hand compared to the Bruins, and they are a ways back. However, this is a team that's been able to rattle off a lot of wins at different points. I think they're fresh off of a 5-game win streak. They might have lost recently, but either way, again, a lot of teams right there that are right next to each other. And I think you probably could make the excuse of, well, if they didn't win it, they had a lot of things that went against them, because going into the season, expectations were kind of low. I was one of those people that said, when looking at what they lost down the middle with Bergeron and Krejci leaving, that was going to be a big blow, and they had to figure out how things were going to work there, as well as some of these renewals that they brought in for that big push that never happened last season. That is, again, pieces that you lose, and that's okay. You're looking at an individual too, like Matthew Poitras, that was a rookie that had about half a point per game. He only got to play about 30 minutes, and I think he might have cooled off as time went along, but it still is just multiple things you could throw out there and say, well, the expectations were never really that big because of the things that were going against them. But I think really at the end of the day, it's just a situation where the Bruins have to be happy where they are, regardless of all the things that have been holding them back, if you think that way. So what happens if they don't win it? Not really anything a lot. If you look at it, it's just a situation where you view it two ways, where you say, oh, winning the President's Trophy is a curse, which it's not. We've seen teams go and win the President's Trophy before, and they, win the cup. That's something that happens. We see teams that don't win the President's Trophy go on to win the cup. So either way, you get a nice trophy and you get to talk about how you were the best team in the league over the course of the regular season. You don't win it, and then you really focus more on the playoffs, which is okay, because winning the President's Trophy theoretically, in all actuality, does give you a little bit easier of a time to the Stanley Cup Final, where you want to ultimately win it. And I think that's where it gets really interesting with Boston and the playoffs, because really this is what it should be all about. And I know that looking back at a lot of Boston teams that have been very, very good for a while, the expectations were high, and a lot of those teams were never able to live up to the hype. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't some moments where they did live up to the hype. I would argue losing to the 2013 Hawks, I mean, that's tough, but they very well could have won that. And then losing to the Blues is heartbreaking, but still, you were one game away from winning a championship. They could have won 3 titles in 10 decades, and they are a side that's been able to be in some meaningful games in a very long stretch of play. I think, interestingly enough, for me, it just comes down to what is the mindset and the expectations for this team going into the playoffs, because like I said, a lot of people didn't expect a lot in the regular season. Now we've seen a team that's had a really good year that will finish well above the 100-point mark, on pace for 113 points. What are a lot of people going to expect out of them? Are they going to say, well, they've got all these things holding them back, we don't really expect a lot, so if they lose in the first or second round, it's okay? Or are they going to say, no, you know what, they had a good year, they need to go out there and prove it? I think that's kind of where I'm at in the camp. I see a team that may not be the most exciting team in the NHL in terms of top to bottom roster construction, but still lots of good players on this team, and a side that's been able to have some good numbers, and a team that's not really had a terrible stretch of play. And ultimately, I would look at a side that ends up getting, maybe about 50 wins and say, yeah, I kind of do expect you to do well, regardless of the fact that you lost a guy that was a multiple-time Selke winner. And that is why the Bruins, in my opinion, need to have high expectations and high hopes going into the playoffs. Now, on the flip side, I'll say this: for the negative Nellies that say we used to hang banners, now we're hanging division titles, or we're just bragging about winning the division, not necessarily saying this is Boston fans, but you'll see this a lot with older fan bases. Think of how big divisions are now compared to the state of the league. I mean, there was a point in the 20s where I believe there was 4 teams for multiple seasons in the NHL. That is literally half of what a division consists of now. So while I wouldn't say that winning the division is something where you say, yeah, we did it, it is still something where you say, we were the best team out of 8 teams in our division. Boston may go out there and be the best team out of all 32 teams in the league as this league gets bigger and harder to win. The Bruins, over the past 15, now almost 20 years, have proven to be one of those teams that really doesn't care how big the league gets as they continue to have success. What do you think for the Boston Bruins? Do you think they'll win the President's Trophy? And if not, does it even matter? Let me know your thoughts down below on that. Let me know what you think for their playoff expectations, how far you think they'll go. Anyway, everybody, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Hey, have a great night. And you go love hockey, alright. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.